Hello, and welcome back to episode 39 of This Is the Year. It's almost the 40th and last episode of This Is the Year, the Swiss AI engineering podcast. In today's episode, we are covering two particularly important things for AI agents. These are the skills. We're going to show a little bit of a deep dive into our own software and the way we think about agentic skills. We talk about GPT 5.2. And then, Joao, with me today as well, we are doing a This Was the Year retrospective. We talk about the biggest business winners, the biggest country winners, the biggest infrastructure winners, and the hottest conspiracy that we had in This Was the Year 2025. For the next episode, actually next week, we are doing an outlook for 2026. So stay tuned also for the future episode. Joao, welcome back. You had your birthday yesterday. Congratulations.
I did.
You had another year. How was your B-Day?
It was a pretty good one. It has been the year, but also I don't call them conspiracies. I call them predictions, or I call them ways of understanding how the world's
Basically
working.
facts.
Cyril is the one doubting my understanding of things, so he calls them conspiracies. It's up to the user then to.
I had to change
decide.
the word from fact to conspiracy based on what I heard, what you're going to say.
Choose your own facts, basically.
Exactly. All right, so I'm looking forward to your hottest conspiracy of 2025. But first, let's briefly discuss skills. I can quickly outline what we believe they are, why they might be the next biggest trend in 2026, and also how we already building that into the software that we are currently operating in. Skills might be the equivalent of an MCP server giving the access to the environment, but skills are really augmenting agents to have human professional capabilities. You can think about it like a work package or a work rucksack in German, basically a backpack that gives the agents particularly very domain-specific knowledge, like, for example, how to do an Excel spreadsheet in the best possible way, how do you do an LBO model, a private equity analysis, or a risk analysis that you can't do in the user prompt. It's just too cumbersome. You don't want to do it in a system prompt, so you have it in a separate file system. Separate file system, before we loop you in, Joao, is just the last notion. You can also run scripts with it. For example, you can equip this skill in the sense that there might be textual markdown content at the same time there might be scripts. What's your definition of skill, Joao? Is that more or less the roundup, or you would add some nuance, and why do we need it from your perspective?
I think skills are like the middle ground. So we talked about having one agent with a lot of tools that can do a lot of things, but it's a single agent. Like at any given request, it has like up to 100 tools to choose from. And we talked about multi-agent systems where each agent is specialized in one single thing. And then from whatever request you give it, it can route and can hand over to certain like side agents, can attribute or delegate task to multiple agents and then get all the results back. Skills are in the middle ground. So it's not one agent that has everything available. It's not separate agents. It's one agent, but it changes with time. So if you're doing some kind of like Excel analysis, it may activate, and may do this totally automatically, but activates the skills necessary for it. So a few tools to work on the Excels, a few skill guides on how to work with Excels, a few examples from your own business. If it's working with something else, it might activate skills from those things. So it doesn't have to be all the skills activated. It doesn't have to see how to do each and every single skill. It just knows what skills are available and basically chooses what to pick and what tools to activate. So I think it's a cool middle ground that makes these systems easier to operate and easier to build than multi-agent, because multi-agent has a lot of pitfalls, and we talked about it. Like if it goes to the wrong agent, then you're just gonna get a very weird response. If you ask for something about stock information and it goes to a travel planner agent, then it might send you to New York Stock Exchange for the weekend. Not something that you wanted to do. You just wanted to see if Google is going up or down.
I mean, still maybe as an add-on, you might still use the skills as like these capabilities for also multiple agents, but it's usually best explained if you have one single agent that can draw from a pool of skills. And maybe I can put it on the screen quickly so it actually makes also some visual sense, especially if you're running software for a particular domain and industry. You can actually give the users the capabilities to shape these skills. So these skills are not a static artifact. They're dynamically shapeable by the user, which again, you just give the users the capability to have access to a very advanced multi-agent systems. We to a system. We talked about it multiple times, MCP, trivial augmented generation. You might have memory, you might have security, and so on and so forth. These components, they remain the same. However, again, you give the users the capability to shape these skills and then maintain it, refine it, and have some sort of monitoring how these skills are being used, being deployed by the agent at runtime in the context window. So the way this usually technically works is you have this pool or this library of skills that, again, humans maintain, humans fine-tune, ideally with their human expert knowledge, financial analyst, private equity analyst, risk analyst, compliance analyst, and you would then basically give the agent the capability to draw from these pools of resources at inference time when needed. And we talked about it multiple times, again, before the podcast show, like this routing to the different skills in the library is actually becoming incredibly important, like the routing is for multi-agent systems. You don't want to have one agent handing the task off to some other travel agent if you're running a finance multi-agent system. And it's the same with skills. You don't want the agent to draw from the X analysis if the actual goal is to build a Word document. So that's really the routing, I think, becomes incredibly important. You might have a skill hierarchy. You might have some other system in place that the skills are being prioritized. But that's a little bit the nuance. I think that's probably what we might be seeing in 2026 when we really have users interacting with the agents. Again, probably for iterative feedback. We talked about macro delegation, micro steering. But I think skills are the next building block that probably are really going to matter when we inject human knowledge into multi-agent systems. Again, I'll probably put a summary here on the screen. Just recently, I published an article in some newspaper in Switzerland on finance with like CEOs and stuff, where it's exactly talking about the element of skills in this multi-agent system. Joao, you think that's actually a trend, or that was anyway meant to come, that financial or business experts in general are not interacting with agents via the prompt? What do you think? Is that anyway like an inevitable one?
I think it makes sense to build it in layers. So like this skills becomes the next layer built or standing on top of the traditional system prompt. Like you don't want your users to change the system prompt. Like especially like let's say the coding agents, because I think they're probably the ones making the most money right now. Like commercially, I don't want, I use a lot of coding agents. I don't want them to write system prompts saying how to code or what's good code, what's bad code. I don't have time for it. I don't have an interest on it. I want it to work from the get-go. However, I want it to have some kind of skill guide or some kind of prompt saying how my project's working. So it may be specific to the project, maybe specific across multiple projects, but I want to say, hey, I want to use these kind of frameworks. I want to use this kind of coding style. And like, if you want to do buttons, make them red. I don't like blue buttons. It can be as specific as you want. Make them round, make them triangle. Like, up to you. But I'm not changing the system prompt. I'm not doing that base work, which should come with a system. It should come with your framework, should come with whatever subscription you're paying for. They should take care of that. But you as a user have the possibility to add on top of it and make the agent work for you. Especially for businesses, this means that they don't have to build the system from scratch. They can buy it from somewhere else. They can have a subscription. They don't have to have a whole AI team building and maintaining the systems. They can just have one or two business analysts, like just change a bit, tweak the system a little bit to make whatever subscription work for them. We're entering now the layering stage where we decide and we're fine-tuning the systems, these agents, to work for specific business models. And I think if companies were not using agents already for business analysts, for financial analysis, for whatever like your business does, they will do in the very near future, because this is becoming not only a possibility, but a very easy possibility. So with a very low cost of entry.
I'm always like asking myself, like if we think of as AI or multi-agent systems as like a cake, are we already reaching the cherry on top, or the skills is just layer number 7? Because we've had MCPs connecting agents to the environment. We had, of course, the base models. We have now the orchestration of models. We now have maybe latent collaboration. We have typical text multi-agent systems that reason and collaborate through text. And now we just have the skill layer on top of everything. Are we yet in the cherry on the top? Probably not. It's just probably another, let's say, layer of cream or another layer of strawberries. And maybe next year, in like 6 to 9 months, we again introduce a new component. But to me, the cake on 2025 multi-agent systems or agentic AI seems fairly complete, again, with having human capability to build skills, maintain skills, and then the agents, whenever they need it, they put it into the context. Again, last caveat, multiple times we mentioned context engineering. Now, not only do you have tool instructions, you not only have system and a user prompt, you don't only have some other elements into context, you also have the skill, let's say markdown files and maybe script executables in this context. So context windows are getting larger, but at the same time, we equally fast fill them up. And we now have to make sure that these systems are still robust and actually execute what we want to do at higher intelligence. Talking about higher intelligence, there was a new model that dropped 5.2 by an infamous company called OpenAI. What's the latest on GPT 5.2, Shuo? Where is it excelling? Talking about Excel.
It is better across the board compared to GPT 5.1. So it's better at tooling, it's better at coding, it's better at just being it's slightly more intelligent. So if you had an IQ for these models, it is slightly better than 5.1. It is not beating Gemini 3.0 Pro at intelligence. It's not beating Anthropic, Sonnet models, or Opus models at coding. So I wonder, and I know this already, but the user can wonder for a few seconds, why this model exists. So across the year, there have been many new models. And each time one of these, I've called 3 or 4 major companies launches a model, they want it to be number one model, at least for a few days, until the next one comes along. And GPT 5.2 comes out, and it's not number one, I think, in any specific area. It's better than 5.1, so it's a gradual improvement, but it's not excelling in any one specific area. Anthropic went really hard on tooling and coding, so their models are the best at coding across many benchmarks. Gemini, Google on Gemini models, and they're now the best at the reasoning and intelligence, so that the world knowledge that they have about multiple subjects, like PhD level knowledge, and they're beating all the other models and benchmarks in those areas. OpenAI is just having fun, I guess. They have ChatGPT. They have a huge user base, so it makes sense. It's a good thing for people using ChatGPT to have better models. But they're not winning any market. I saw any new benchmarks or one in one specific area. So I wonder why they launched the model. And I think it's just to be in the competition. So I don't know if you want to hear my conspiracy theory just yet, but I think OpenAI is struggling a little bit. We'll get onto that in a few minutes, but it's a better model. It is more expensive though. So if you check the pricing, it's, I think, 20-30% more expensive than 5.1. Now we're getting into the area where I don't think OpenAI is willing to lose any more money on the models. So if you want to use them, you have to pay full price of operating them, which means running fairly expensive GPUs with fairly expensive electricity, fairly expensive and even more expensive now memory on the data centers. And so this was the year to build. This will, like, the next at least half a decade will be the year for the agents, but the running cost of them will be slightly more expensive than it has been so far, because the free trial of agents, I think, is coming to an end, and we're now entering the full cost of it.
I think it's a good summary. I have pretty much nothing to add to your arguments. The only thing I can say, I pretty much didn't even see it was released today. There are so many new models that are like making headlines, especially when you are saying, oh, there was a new benchmark reached by Gemini when it came out, in literally a significant advancement in intelligence. And then you look into Claude's setup, which usually dominates the coding. So there was like the headlines. GPT 5.2, I think it didn't make any, if not no headlines at all. So it's actually not even mentioned being on my radar. I think it's not the most positive nuance. Not that I'm the benchmark to actually meet, to reach, but it's just not something that I would particularly like interested in now trying out. It's probably just coming on my UI, on my MacBook Pro, and that's pretty much it. But I'm not going into the full details, at least from 5.2. Maybe GPT-6 is going to be a game changer yet again, but let's see. Component of the Outlook episode. Talking about maybe the retro episode, let's quickly do a This Was the Year segment. To reintroduce it, we are quickly deep diving into the biggest business winner of the year. Maybe you can drop yours, I'm dropping mine. We have some sort of argument why we don't meet the same. And then biggest country winner, biggest infrastructure winner, and the hottest conspiracy, which for you is probably the hottest fact. Which one did you have as the biggest business winner of 2025? This was the year 2025. Who are you picking and why?
I'm going to go with a very weird choice, which will be DeepSeek and Alibaba, like I think one of the two major Chinese model providers, because they built an immense amount of branding and they set up the stage to sell models for like just entering the podium basically of the top major model providers, which is a very expensive podium to be in, and they got in with almost no costs in terms of offering the models. They focus on building the best models they could. They have their own R&D teams, and they set up a stage to sell their models, I think, as little money as they could. OpenAI spent millions to make ChatGPT free for all. Anthropic spent millions like in their own research, but also making their own chatbots. A lot of branding, a lot of research, a lot about talk in regulatory constraints, some research in alignments from AI to humans. The Chinese model providers just focus on making models. And very easily they got in the podium, and they set up a stage, I think, 2026 will be the year where they'll be starting to sell the models. So no longer open source, which is bad for the open source community, but very good business-wise for them, because I think they got there. And I'm picking them to the sheer ratio of money spent and results gotten from their strategy.
So well done to China. Before I give the pushback and presenting my choice, I think you're probably completely getting it right. As we mentioned quickly before the episode, I just returned from a trip to Japan. I was in Tokyo for a few days, and just looking around, I think if I compare whatever I've seen in Japan, I don't want to really say anything negative on their economy, on their state. This is definitely not my point to say that. But if I compare to the vibe I've had in Shanghai, literally 6 months ago, when I was in Shanghai in July, I think if I compare Tokyo, which is of course a vibrant city, but it just gives a little bit of a vibe that I believe China, just the mindset of China, the sheer technology on the street with, again, self-driving cars, self-driving trucks that have absolutely no cockpit anymore. Like the amount of trucks I've seen in China, literally having no humans in the car was insane, was mind-boggling. If you cross the street, you look inside the car, there is absolutely no human in it. It doesn't even have a window. Some of these trucks, they have no window. Whereas the Japanese ones, of course, it's fully fuel-based. There is some sort of electricity-based cars as well. But self-driving, I didn't see much. Anyway, long story short, I do believe China is definitely an absolute beast in AI. That's a little bit already taking some nuance away from my hottest conspiracy later on, but I do believe it's a great choice. My choice was Google, mostly because I put most of my eggs in my portfolio at the very beginning into Google, where everybody was like, Google is dead, this is not going to work, they'll lose their entire search business. I did more or less believe that if a Nobel Prize winner like Demis Hassabis is more or less heading DeepMind, I think it is usually, if they can beat or if they can achieve protein folding, I think they can also achieve some sort of cutting edge large language model with the talents they have. They also have basically the scientists that developed the transformer paper. I think they were able to do that. If I look now at the stock price, I can quickly put it on the screen. Today we're shooting the episode on the 12th of November. I think it is at an incredibly...
of December.
December, yeah. 12th of December.
Don't push us back a whole month. People will think we're out of date.
That's true. So 2025, Google is more or less at its peak. And also the model, Gemini, again, put it on the screen here on the benchmark, is at its peak intelligence. So for me, the biggest business winner of 2025, Google. Looking ahead, TBD, but I think they're more or less caught up on stock price, they caught up on capability, and they're maybe even far ahead on intelligence. Who did you have as the biggest country winner? I mean, is it again China for you? Is it a different country, or who would you choose?
Even before we get into that, yep. Google thing, and we talked about it, like that we weren't, I think we were disappointed at Google for being a bit behind in terms of models for a little bit, but people thinking that like they're going to lose their search business, and I know there was like a common sentiment, or at least common enough to affect some stock prices. that's very much wishful thinking. We have LLMs that can do like pretty good results, but it's not something that can scale to the scale that Google has. Like to have a search result, a search engine for millions or billions of people working at like an actual business-wise like cost. You can't have an LLM like be a search engine for everyone. They'll be insanely expensive. I mean, I think some startups got funding that way. They're going to promise to bring down Google or at least make the competition for it. Google has their business for a while, and I think they set up a system where not only they have a really good search engine, but they can run it at a cost that makes sense for them, and they make a lot of money for it.
I mean,
So
that's completely
uh,
true. Yeah.
they
I mean,
set up a
maybe
stage that it's very hard to take down that one monopoly.
it's a
Maybe one
huge
day,
body
and
move.
I hopefully, but
Hmm.
we'll
I mean,
see.
I don't know if you actually, are you using the AI mode? If you go on google.com, the main
Very
website, like
rarely.
you go to
Have,
AI mode.
have you been using it?
I actually called myself multiple times, I think the last 2, 3 weeks. Actually, funny enough, just to plot it here, when I was in Japan, I couldn't use ChatGPT, the app, so it was completely blocked. It's not working. I didn't know why, basically. Yet when I went to the AI mode of Gemini of Google.com, it actually worked. I don't know if they have some sort of deal with the Japanese government. Maybe I'm actually developing a conspiracy here, but I just simply couldn't use Claude. I couldn't use GPT on my phone, yet I could use the AI mode of Google. So in Japan, AI mode of Google is flying, Joel. So that
I
is
mean,
that is
I
at least
imagine
one large society.
even when I'm doing traditional Google searches, the Gemini, like say, like TLDR, like that shows up on top, is really useful. I mean, the summary is being like sometimes I don't have to open links, and at least half the times I don't have to open links because I have the information I want. Like credibly, I find it credible enough that I can just take it as it's written, and I go from it. So I don't have to open the links. I think some websites will start to suffer from it. I think some websites have complained already that they're getting less traffic because people go on Google, they got the results, they go out and they use whatever information they have. They're not going to the websites, so it might screw Google's business, like ad business, a little bit. But
Yeah.
it is immensely useful. So I think we're entering like a new stage of the internet where we still need the website, we still need the data that's on the websites, but we might not be going to the websites. And I don't have a way to capitalize or a way to profit from having a website that no one goes to.
I know we talked about it, I think in
So
July or something. AI search optimization or AI SEO, whatever you want to call it. I mean, some good friends of mine, they're running some larger departments on that also includes the product of their website of the company. And they mentioned to me multiple times that the search volume via direct Google lead is incredibly plummeting. And they're all trying to like wrap their head around how do we get ranked higher and actually being included even in this summary by Gemini that's reaching the very top. So if you ask any question, for example, in Switzerland, one good friend works at the very large and heads one of the very large insurance company website developments, is multiple times mentioning to me, like for them, it's incredibly difficult. How do we yield this like being summarized when a user is asking something about Swiss insurance, Swiss household insurance, Swiss car insurance, as opposed to some other insurance provider? Because usually Gemini just mentions maybe one, maximum two insurance providers when the user asks about the car insurance. And back in the day, you could do that with regular keyword triggers in the website. Now you just have to somewhat pray that you're being picked up by the AI and being spit out as part of the summary. There's actually really, it seems to be a really important challenge. Again, being ranked in these AI summaries on top. So, biggest country winner for you, China. You stick to China, or you have another one in the roster?
I might say China, yeah. I mean, the Europeans, like European countries, are there. I think they're just existing, they're benefiting from models coming from both China and the US, but business-wise, they're not participating in the model development. The European Commission, like the EU in general, is making, I think, optimistic isolation about AI, so maybe hindering a bit the startups coming out of Europe, but overall being a good player, or at least a lawful good player in terms of AI isolation. But in terms of AI development itself, not so much. The US is a lot of things. They're number one in quite a few topics. I think it's a bit
I mean, they're
messy at
also
the
number
moment.
one at the leaderboard if you look into all AI models.
They
Most of them,
are.
at least.
But I think it's because most companies prefer to have their bases on the US, like headquarters on the US. Maybe tax reasons, and maybe like economic, because the US is a very big market, easy to get
Talent
into.
reasons. Probably.
But there are also, all those companies are setting up offices in Zurich. Maybe the talent-wise, Europe is still a big player there. I think Europe is exporting people, the US is exporting businesses, and China is exporting models. Like, they're all focusing on different things.
It's a good triangular summary. I wish I could choose my country winner to be Switzerland, maybe next year, but you're completely right. Anthropic, OpenAI, now Mistral, they have labs in Switzerland, very close to the university I went, ETH Zurich. And also Google's teams are also in Zurich, not only in the UK, but also in Zurich. My biggest country winner, I mean, we talked about the usual suspects. You mentioned China is your pick. Of course, the obvious number one in the world is still the US. I think I took the third approach, which is Saudi Arabia, from maybe it's a bit of a, let's say, contrarian belief. Once again, was there a few months ago, and they have this very large infrastructure projects, not only for real estate, not only for hosting the World Cup, they actually also are investing heavily and multiple billions into AI infrastructure. We talked about this triangular problem of electricity, data centers, and then modeling itself. I think they're meeting at least two of the three triangular problems, especially being electricity. That's electricity dense, Saudi Arabia being. And I think that could be an interesting third player in the world. We talked about it many times. There is Humane. I put it on the screen as well quickly there, which is basically their OpenAI / kind of hyperscaler as well. So it's a mix between an AI lab. They have their own LLM, which is Arabic based. Language-wise, and they also have data centers, and I believe Elon is also using these data centers to train Grok. So I think Saudi Arabia, to me, is the biggest country winner of 2025. It was not fully on the radar, but I think they really, really doubled down in infrastructure investing, talent investing, and also now, again, being used as token factories for Western companies. Lastly, potential maybe even Europe inference. We talked about that again. You might use Saudi Arabia inference in the future because it might be a lot cheaper as opposed to running it in Germany or in Switzerland. Biggest infrastructure winner, Joao, who did you pick? Business winners, maybe the general business. Infrastructures, maybe some infrastructure company within AI, and maybe why?
I mean, the obvious choice, I think, would be Google, like as the biggest hyperscaler. Infra-wise, I think they're very well positioned. I'm gonna go with not choice and say Microsoft, because Microsoft did some succession level like business schemes. They got exclusive access to OpenAI. They leveraged the hell out of it to be like the one cloud that you could use for GPT access. At least the closed source GPT were the best ones. And now that the GPT, like the OpenAI, is losing their number one position, or at least not as stable there, they're diversifying into Anthropic, into more models. They keep renaming their services in the clouds. There were cognitive services, there were intelligence services. I think they'll call it AI Foundry. Maybe they'll settle on a name sometime in the next few years. Naming aside, I think they're being smart. I don't like Windows. I don't like their products in general. But I think in terms of cloud, they're being super smart in terms of choosing the best players at the best time. They're jumping ship from OpenAI. They still maintain a very big investment in OpenAI. OpenAI is not going anywhere anytime soon, but they're diversified at just the right time. So if you want to look and see what the best model providers are, or what's the very near future of AI, just see the portfolio of Microsoft, and you'll have a very good idea of what's happening out there.
So that's
my
an
take.
interesting choice. I mean, I was stuck between AWS or Amazon, basically mostly the AWS service of Amazon, and Micron. But I would probably go with Micron, which is to me the biggest infrastructure winner, mostly because of memory being one of the constraining factors for reasoning. We talked about it many times here on the show in January. And looking ahead into the future, maybe leading up to this hottest conspiracy I'm going to mention, it might still be one of the bottlenecks. Are we still having sufficient memory? Yes or no, TBD. But I think Micron, again, I can also put it on the screen just for completeness reasons. Its stock is doing pretty okay compared to actually the
Pretty okay,
Microsoft
yeah.
stock.
That's a way to put it.
So it's been up, and it's been mostly going up the last few months. I don't have an assessment of how much more steam there is in the engine to actually push the stock even to even higher dimensions, because it's somewhat of a commoditizable asset, again, memory being. But for me, at least, if I look back at 2025, it actually was one of the reasons in January why I put, again, significant portion of the portfolio into Micron. And now looking into it on the 12th of December, I think it was and might be the biggest winner in infra in 2025. Hottest conspiracy, Joao. What is your conspiracy or slash fact, maybe from your perspective?
I was teasing it a couple topics ago, but in a very short way of putting it, I think OpenAI is a failed Uber. So, people who
Explain
don't
that to me.
remember,
Uber is pretty good.
people who don't remember, Uber came out and their business model, at least, was basically trying to kill whatever taxi service was in the cities that they joined by having an incredible cheap alternative. And so they were so cheap, they were losing money, but they had the funding to keep it going for a while. And when they kill a taxi service, then they would push the prices up and basically have almost a monopoly because people were locked into Uber. It works. It's incredibly more convenient than taxis. And they won by doing that. They won by being cheaper at the right time and then making it more expensive as soon as they had the people and they had the clients. I think OpenAI tried to do the same because they had an incredible new service, ChatGPT and the GPT models. Maybe they didn't plan to have this level of competition this soon or this fast. I mean, Anthropic, Google came out very recently after ChatGPT came out, and they started putting out models that were comparable to GPT models. And so they lost a bunch of money in ChatGPT. They lost a bunch of money in offering the models to people at a very low cost, basically saying, look how good they are, look how cheap they are, please build something on top of this and use our services. And I think they made a lot of money from it, but they also burned quite a few millions like daily just to keep it alive at that cost. And now that they want to increase prices like Uber did, they are. And then we talked about like new model GPT 5.2 is more expensive than 5.1. I don't think it justifies the price, but they are making it more expensive. And I think people just jump ship because Uber didn't have this level of competition when they increased their prices. You have Gemini models which are really good at reasoning. You have Anthropic models which are really good at coding. So Anthropic always market their models as expensive as they should. So I don't think they're losing a lot of money on running those. They focus on B2B. OpenAI tried to get a monopoly of the market. I don't think they got it. And I think that's why Microsoft started diversifying their portfolio. I think, and OpenAI is still a very big company. They're one of the biggest players in the world right now in terms of Gen AI. I think they're in troubled waters. And if they were a stock, I would be wary. They're not public yet, so I'm not too worried about that. But I am worried about what the future will look like because I think they're desperately need the money. And I don't think they'll get it just from increasing prices.
Okay, so that's your conspiracy slash, you call it facts. Again, I had to summarize it into the domain of conspiracy theory. But I of course, I would agree with your point of view. I think my view is a little bit looking ahead. It's the conspiracy or the hottest conspiracy that we in the West, we believe we are actually also winning in 2026. And it's almost a given that the US is going to win the race. I would put China and US in, again, December 2025 to have maybe the equal probability to win the race next year, but on different vectors. So the US is, of course, winning on chip advancements, like having the most advanced chips. But I think most people kind of sometimes forget a little bit, at least in my ideology, that China doesn't need the best chips because they have a lot more efficient models. So every model they create is the most efficient, is kind of the best to run on a let's say, more condensed chipset, more condensed infrastructure set as opposed to the West. It's a little bit like we would think as a large V12 engine, we can just fuel it up in the West and we can let the car run. And in China, they build like BYD, so full self-driving cars based on a completely different technology being batteries. So it's a little bit like this. We have the V12s, which might be the NVIDIA chips, the large Blackwells. They cost a fortune to run, a fortune to cool. In China, we don't have these advanced chips. They have their own memory company. They have their own fab factory, basically. And they can actually have them run on a lot cheaper infrastructure and a lot cheaper electricity at larger scale. So that's a little bit like this. We might have larger engines on the west, but more chips just on the east. And that in sum, if we look at it from a general level, actually gives the same probability, at least in my head, China winning the race in 2026 and also the West winning the race in 2026. That's a little bit as a conspiracy. We always think we in the West are so much better because we have NVIDIA, we have TSMC, but I would put this, let's say, a bit like conspiracy view now that China doesn't need to have all that because they have more efficient models and infinite electricity. I know if a physician is listening, physics person is listening, then I have a problem again on infinite energy, but you know what I mean? They have a lot more electricity being pumped up than the West. So that's a little bit my conspiracy. China and the West, we are on equal par of shoes heading into the 2026 race off. This is the year 2026, which is again alluding to the fact that in the next episode, we are going to look into the future and we are going to talk about who will be the biggest winner in business in 2026, country winner, infrastructure winner. We have some hot conspiracy theories as well. We might be taking an angle on politics as well. And maybe we are also predicting which one will be the best model end of 2026. And maybe if we reach AGI, probably not, but let's see next week.
We'll see.
Maybe
anything more around June next year.
Maybe in 6 months.
I mean,
anything more to add?
Just a teaser for the next episode. I think the race for the best model, the race to be the best provider, it's very similar to the Formula 1 races, where everyone's trying to be the best. So it's a very bleeding edge technology. Everyone's trying to improve and recreate, and every new season there's a new way of going about it. The one difference from Formula 1 is there's no global rules that they all have to follow. So while in you can see Mercedes and Ferrari and all the major teams are building their cars and trying to be following the rules, trying all do basically the same, but you're seeing who does it best. In the AI race, it's again bleeding edge technology, still trying to be the number one, but they're not doing it the same because there's no rules to follow. So they're all taking different approaches, and it's interesting to see. And we will make some predictions on what approach is working best and what approach will work best in the future. My conspiracy theory is that OpenAI's approach was not the best, or it was the best for a little while, but it won't hold out for 2026. So they have to change, and I think we'll see a very different OpenAI in the future. But all of that and more to follow on next week's episode. I don't want to give too much away.
So in F1 language, you would basically put it like this: if they had some sort of panel, they would be disqualified, like McLaren was 2 races ago.
Probably.
Something like this along these lines. By the way, congrats to Lando Norris for winning the F1 championship. I was following it tightly. It was a very, very close race, but I'm personally looking forward to go to Barcelona F1 next year, maybe Azerbaijan. I've never been to Azerbaijan, but I need to close up Baku. So maybe we can shoot an episode again with some sort of F1 mindset on AI. Great to have you again back, João. See you in the next one. This will be the year 2026. We're covering some best bets and best estimates for the next year. And in that sense, bye-bye, João. Take care and see you in the next one.